Welcome everyone to episode 41 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts and today I talked with Becki Whitton, also known as Aphir, who is an electronic, ambient and pop producer, mix engineer, mastering engineer, and is also the creator of the Wettest 100. In this episode, we talked about having great communication with the artist that you're working with so that you can properly uncover their artistic vision, the importance of active listening when you're making decisions in a mix, as well as a big discussion about the Wettest 100. For all that and heaps more, stay tuned. If you can do us a favor and share this podcast across your socials, in a conversation, anything like that, just spread the word of this podcast. We want to get it out to as many people as possible, as well as following along on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find this and listen to this, make sure you're following or subscribed so you can stay up to date. If you have any suggestions or requests or anything like that, you can send us an email, podcast.whatsthatsound@gmail.com. You can find the link in the show notes as well as links to everything that we discuss in this episode. Thanks again for checking out the podcast. Enjoy this episode with Becki Whitton. You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. What's going on? I'm here with Becki Whitton, aka Aphir. Welcome to the podcast, Becki.
Thank you so much, Stu. I appreciate you having me on.
You're very welcome, and it's great to finally meet. And it's going to be a good chat. I can tell already. For anyone that doesn't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of a background as to kind of what you do in the music industry? I know you wear many hats, but we'll unpack some of that. But just give us a brief background as to what you do.
One or two hats. So I do a lot of mixing and mastering for other artists. I do a bunch of vocal production as well, less so, I guess, since the pandemic. And I also make music as Aphir, which is kind of like a lot of ambient stuff and also some experimental kind of lyrically driven music. And I also used to manage sound for live sound for Girls Rock Camp in Canberra from like the time it started up until 2022. So it was a big stretch.
Wow.
And I also recently, in the last 3 years, have been running an initiative called the Wettest 100, which is kind of like an alternative music countdown.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we'll dive into that. But first of all, let's take it back to the start. Where did music come into play for you?
Oh, okay. Right back to the start. I started making music on my own after having been in a few bands in Canberra, or like electronic music collaborations / bands. And then I moved to Melbourne in 2023, and none of the people who I was in bands or working with came as well. So they were all still in Canberra. So it was way harder to keep those collaborations going. And I really wanted to still make music. And one of my main collaborators in Canberra had been like, hey, you should jump on GarageBand for iPad and just record all vocal music. Because I was a singer. I didn't play any other instruments. And for a while that seemed really intimidating, but then I gave it a go because I had something that I was like, I have an idea now. I want to lay it down. And I'm pretty sure that GarageBand for iPad only had 8 tracks in it, or it was 6 or 8 tracks. So I was cramming as many vocals as I possibly could into this tiny piece of software.
Yeah, wow.
And it was really fun. And then I went from that to getting Ableton and recording my own more layered vocal arrangements and learning how to edit vocals and learning how to just make beats in Ableton kind of came next. And I studied at SAE for a time to kind of learn about mixing and mastering. And then as part of studying, I had to do an internship. You kind of have to do that to complete the bachelor.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I thought it would, like, even going into the degree, I was like, yeah, that's positive pressure. But then, like, I did super well in my first year of uni. And so they sent me to this like conference, which used to be called Face the Music. I forget what it's called these days. It's like, it's still around, but it's just different name. And I had made a list of all the people. It was like really nerdy, but I'd made this little list of everyone that I wanted to talk to there. And it was like Anna Lavity and there was this guy, Andrei Eremin, and he was kind of like my age and doing a bunch of mixing and mastering. And I was like, oh, I got to meet that guy. He's like talking on a panel. So I like drank my cider in one gulp and like walked up to him and was like, hello. And we got along really well. And then I was like, oh, like this guy seems really nice. And he doesn't seem like weird and sexist. And I always hear about how people in the music industry are like weird and sexist. And so I sent him an email and I was like, hey, do you want to have me as an intern? And he did. It turns out he like really needed someone to help him out at that point in time. And so I started out working for him as an intern. And this was like while I was studying, so my second year of study. And then that turned into a paid job. And then all the while I was doing that, I was also like freelancing because he, I guess, works in this very, like even to this day, works in like quite a poppy world, like a lot of like stuff like he mastered like Tones and I, Dance Monkey.
Wow.
And has like done a bunch of work with artists like, G Flip, Peach PRC, poppy kind of people. And like I love that stuff, but I also really love like the experimental side of things, like a world of kind of like ambient music and noise music and like kind of art pop kind of stuff. And so I was like freelancing, working with friends and other artists in that kind of world while I was working for Andrei. And then gradually over the years, my job with Andrei kind of sat alongside that freelance career. I was doing those two things. And then when the pandemic hit, I guess because like a lot of artists like instead of touring, they were like making music instead. And so suddenly I had like a way higher volume of work than ever before, just mixing and mastering and occasionally producing for other artists. And so I branched out on my own. Andrei was like, do you have time for this job anymore? And I was like, oh, actually, maybe I don't. But it's been nice because like he lives in the States now, but we've stayed friends and we've worked on a few records sort of like as independent collaborators in recent years instead of like me as the underling, as it were. So that's been really nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, he's huge. I've like heard of him, of course. He's one of a good export that we've had in the recent years. So I want to know kind of what things you learnt from that sort of period working alongside him.
I mean, so much of my craft, really. I think, and more, like, I mean, it wasn't just mixing and mastering that I learned about working with him. It was also because like a big part of my job was like setting up mix sessions for him. And so I would receive these like packages of stems from producers who were like amazing, like people who are touring the world and taking approaches to production that I had not encountered before. And when you really unpack all the stems in an arrangement like that, you can really dig into like what people are thinking, I guess, like what strategies they're using, like what effect is coming in when and why and all of that sort of thing. And like setting up a mix, I'm going through every stem and like checking, the stereo field. Is it like phase compatible? Is it like, I don't know, is it a drum or a synth? Where does it need to sit in the session and what subgroups it's going into and all that kind of stuff. So it's like you're spending a lot of time with those stems. And that just meant that I was able to level up as a producer as well as a mix engineer.
That's like a fast track to seeing how everyone does it. That's great. That's awesome. I mean, that's such a rare experience. So you know, to have that, you know, in the first few years of you doing this is so great, and you know, awesome. Well done.
It was. I was very lucky. Yeah, I appreciate those opportunities a lot.
That's great. Awesome. So, you know, when you're looking at your own craft, I guess, moving into, you know, doing the freelancing stuff and that sort of thing, and even working on your own music, what sort of things did you take from those sessions? Like, are there any key standout things that you're like, oh, of course I need to do that from now on? Or, you know, was there like a mindset approach, that sort of thing, when you're moving into your own sessions?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the main thing is a mindset. The main thing that's really stuck, I guess, because like I was working for Andrei at a specific point in his journey as well. Like I think over the time that I've known him, he has grown and changed a lot in his own approach to both mixing and mastering, and probably production too, you know. But something that I feel was there from the get-go and has really stuck with me, and I think has stuck with him as well, is just the importance of deep listening when it comes to EQ. Like, I think there is this temptation to like fast track vibe in the mixing stage in particular, and maybe sometimes in mastering too. There's like a temptation to fast track vibe by buying expensive fancy plugins that like you're not maybe totally sure what they're doing. Like, is it saturation? Is it compression? Is it a little bit of everything, you know? Yeah. And I think that something that I really got from working with him was like the focus on actually knowing what you're doing, you know, like know when you're applying something to dynamics control, know when you're applying something to like add saturation, like and EQ. Like, I don't know, I feel really nerdy when I talk about EQ because it's really like I love it so much. Like I love to hear like a well-applied change, like, and I love to hear like what that brings to a piece of music. And I love feeling sure and knowing that I can make a change that will like bring about what the artist's intended vision actually is. It's just a really like, having that level of control and having that level of like deep listening and respect for what each artist brings. I think that's been one of the most valuable things. Yeah.
And it's fascinating. You've touched on a few points where obviously keeping the artist's integral vision in your mind as you're working is one of the biggest ones, but also, you know, the listening aspect of something and really making great judgment calls, and, you know, the temptation to be heavy-handed, like you said, which is what those sorts of plugins tend to do. They tend to be quite heavy-handed so that when it, you know, is applied, you go, oh, this sounds awesome, but actually is it suiting what you're actually intending it to do for this track or for this part or, you know, anything like that, or for this person's voice or anything like that. So, yeah, you brought up a few great points, and I guess then, you know, how did you start to uncover those, you know, those thought processes, or was there any key moment that taught you to really listen deeply to the stuff that you're working on, and things like that?
There have been a few interesting moments. Like, I think particularly with like respecting the artist's vision. One story that I like to tell people is about working on a specific ambient record that came to me like really not mono-compatible at all. Like, obviously ambient music is a genre that is notorious for like having, you know, some difficulties if you're trying to like convert it to a vinyl master or whatever, right, you know, right. Like it's a wide time, ambient music. But I remember working on this particular record, and it's like a wonderful record, and mastering it and being very conscious of the mono compatibility and being like, oh, like, here's what I need to do to make this mono compatible, but it changes things so much. And I kind of went to the artist and I was like, hey, look, this is the situation. Like, some of this record is going to disappear if you're playing it on your like little UE boom or whatever. And we had a big chat about it, and basically like the conclusion we drew was that their listenership probably wouldn't be listening in mono, and so they were just going to roll with the mixes they had, and like I would use quite a light hand in mastering. But it's so interesting because there are obviously, like, you know, if you study mastering at university or like study under someone who's like working in a very like radio streaming pop kind of world, they would be like, make that mono compatible. But there are just so many different audiences, you know, and so many different requirements that artists have for their tracks to reach their specific audiences. And sometimes like what people want isn't like the, I don't know, cut and dry, technical approved thing.
Yeah, it's so true. And like, you know, there's the time to be really technical. There's the time to focus a lot on the technical aspect of engineering and mixing and mastering and things like that. But then there's the time for taking a step back and, you know, just appreciating it for what it is. And you know, I guess I can relate that to, you know, when you're producing an artist, and there can be that tendency to completely change what they've done in a verse or a chorus, for example, and be like, you know, that's not going to work here. But then you have to also be thinking, but this is where that artist is at this point in time, and it's important for me to capture what the essence of that artist is right now and right here. And those sorts of things don't necessarily matter to a lot of people. And, you know, there's some extremely raw production. There's things for all different listenerships. So it's such a great point that you raise. Like, and you know, dabbling in experimental electronic and ambient stuff, there really aren't any rules. So you kind of have to stop yourself, you know, when you're trying to enforce those things on people, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think it's just always a conversation because like there's such diversity in the visions that people have for their artwork, and that's always like exciting to go deeper into. And I think that, you know, sometimes like I think especially like coming fresh out of uni, like there's like a rigor that is expected as an engineer, of course. And I think it can sometimes make you feel a bit stressed, like especially when you're new on the scene. And it's easy to like, you know, try and be working very quickly, or like you're feeling under pressure. So you're working in more of a like your brain's not working as slowly is what I mean. Like, and I think that, you know, there's a level of sort of chill that is required to be able to like approach certain problems and thoughtfully communicate like why that might be an issue. And like mostly artists are like really, you know, interested in that kind of terminology, right? Like they want to know what you're doing to some extent. Like maybe they don't want to like go and, you know, study like digital theory, but like they want to know like what you're doing that's like bringing that extra special sauce to it all. And so if your brain's kind of working slowly, then you can see what might be an issue, but like technically, but you can also like explain that to the artist in a way where it's like, what would you like to do here? Like, here's everything that I can do on my end to help you realize this vision. But there might be a trade-off between like two options, you know. And the more you can feel that ease and I mean, I say like your brain working slowly. I suppose like what I really mean is like feeling less pressure or anxiety. Like, I think that just in general, I mean, this is like something that I think broadly would make the music industry a better place. And now I could be waxing lyrical, but like, I do feel like there's a lot of pressure floating around from various places. And I think if the pace just slowed a little, there'd be some extra juice that we could all get out of projects, broadly speaking.
And so what stands out to me is like feeling that pressure and that the confidence that comes with having done things a bunch of times. And like you said, it can be really hard to not second guess yourself in the early years when you're maybe not as confident. And so, you know, how did you build that confidence up? How did you build your skills? How did you then have that confidence to be able to, you know, explain this to people that maybe haven't been in those situations before or haven't come up with those types of issues before?
That's a great question. I mean, I sort of just think it maybe happened with time, but I think it also probably happened with being in a patient and understanding community. Like, I think that it is really important when you're developing as either an artist or an engineer or any kind of creative that people, like, they give you time to get better at stuff. I think that's just so crucial. And, like, you know, support and advice. And I think that, like, because especially when I started out, like a lot of the artists that I worked with were like exactly the same age as me. Like we were all like super young and super fresh. And so we were chatting as equals even from the get-go. And people would just say like, you know, if in the early days I did something they didn't like, they'd just be like super upfront about it. And it was genuinely helpful.
Yeah, totally. I guess, you know, once you've heard something a bunch of times, it can make sense, like, and it can solidify this, you know, process, I guess. But when you are first starting out, it's hard to know what is the right way to do something or the right way to, you know, even learn. Like learning can be so difficult because of the amount of information that's out there these days. And so when you're first starting up with you know, friends or peers that are in the same sort of space as you, it's exciting, but it's also like you're trying to learn together. And so those honest conversations are great. Like, and it can be harder to actually hear that when you're more experienced because there's a tendency to be like, oh, I know what I'm doing, you know. So, and yeah, go on.
And that feeling of kind of like I have to know what I'm doing now. Like I'm at this stage, like I have to know. It's like, no, learning never really stops, I guess. Yeah. Like you just keep finding new inroads into the craft that show it to you through different eyes. And I think I think part of the reason for that is it does hark back to what I said before about like every artist having such a unique vision. It's like you're always, as a mix engineer or as a mastering engineer, you're always going to find something new to learn because every artist is going to be thinking about music in a different way and they're going to teach you different ways to listen. Yeah. And having those channels of communication really open with the artists that you work with is so good because it gives you like more opportunities to learn that.
Yeah. And to me, that's what the fun part of, you know, collaborating with someone is like unpacking or learning that new thing that you've just never thought of before. It's like, holy shit, I've never even thought about it that way. You've blown my mind. That's they're the fun times for me, is like just unpacking that new skill or new way of actually thinking about your craft. I love that. I want to, you know, let's talk about your solo stuff, you know, Aphir. Like, where did that come about? Was that a really organic thing? Did someone kind of, you were talking before about, you know, your friend encouraging you to do that, to do the vocal-based stuff. tell us a bit about that and, the influences and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah. So my vocal stuff or my Aphir stuff has been existing under the same artist name for like since that first garage band effort. It's kind of funny because, I've often thought, or like people have kind of in the past, said to me, you've done a lot of different stuff under this artist name. Would you ever branch out and do like some of your work under a different project name? But I always had this like really strong commitment to like keeping it under the same kind of bracket, just because when I was able to see, like when I started out making music, like I probably wouldn't have like pursued my own stuff to the same extent if I hadn't seen other artists, like, and it's kind of rare, but these artists are around, where like they've got their earliest stuff still up on the internet. Like the biggest example for me is Grimes. I mean, the place she's at now is deeply confusing and a bit worrying. But when she was kind of in that whole phase of releasing Visions, which was kind of like her breakthrough record, all of her original stuff like was still online, and some of it is like quite like very cool, like very characterful, but like audio quality is kind of not. It's not.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just like seeing that, she did start out with a rougher sound and was able to develop it, like that made me feel like it could be possible for me. And so I kind of thought like it's almost like cheating or something if I hide away the like early stuff that to me sounds like super, naive and maybe a bit embarrassing. So I mean, for me, it's just always been like I find it easy to make stuff for Aphir because like I always have something to say, like, and I've always just, I guess, used it as an outlet for like learning new production stuff that I want to learn, whether it's like, my second full-length album was me kind of learning how to make beats as opposed to like learning just how to chop up vocals in Ableton. And then my third album was kind of like learning how to make music very quickly when I was very scared during the pandemic. And then my fourth record was from these marathon vocal improv streams that I did, where like throughout 2021, I just basically like worked up, like gradually spent more and more time on my Twitch channel, just doing started with like a 2-hour vocal improv stream, and then it got to the point of like 12 hours on the Boxing Day of that year. And it was just like, singing and manipulating it with electronics for 12 hours. And it left me with like a lot of stuff to draw from, like a lot of material that I could kind of dig through and find what was good and find what fit together into like a world that made sense and turn it into a record. So it's always just been like a journey of improvement, I suppose, like trying to dig deeper and work out what my physical body can do and what my brain can concoct.
Well, it doesn't sound like you have trouble with creativity by you're regularly putting stuff out, whether that be solo stuff or collaborations and things like that. So talk to me a little bit about creativity. How do you get into that creative zone? Is there specific things that you have to do, or is it kind of just let's see what happens?
Here is what fuels my creativity. And this might be TMI, but I really feel like the main fuel for my creativity is like having things to say to people that I like can't say to them. And more often than not, that's in like a romantic context, but it's like that thing of like having this conversation in real life is like not going to be productive, and like, or it's not going to be like right, or, you know, whatever it might be. But it is going to make good art, and that is where it comes from.
Yeah, cool. And then obviously that, you know, fuels you when it comes to vocal stuff. What about the composing and production side of things? Is that a similar thing, or do the vocals come first? Does the music come first? Talk to me about that side of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I always think of myself as like, you know, lyrics and melody first, but I do spend obviously a lot of time like singing without words, and I produce remixes for people, and like produce for other people where it's like, you know, I'm making music, but it's not with my own message in it, or all that kind of thing. But I think like for me, production, anything that is like, you know, production or production adjacent is just really like, I find it very meditative. And there's a sense of like once I've laid down any level of a good idea, there's a bit of a like, I guess, flow state that kicks in, and it becomes quite like meditative to like add things that feel right. But I do think it does ride a bit on like having a good idea to start with. Like I think, you know, in cases where I've like gotten really stumped with a beat or something, like for example, recently I was trying to produce a remix on my Twitch stream, and I started out and I was like, okay, it's going to be like an ambient version of this song, and it was just like so wrong to do it as an ambient version, and it took me like multiple streams to realize that it was not working. And then I got like a sick beat down, and once I had that, I was like, okay, everything else is just going to fall into place. It's cool.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. I love it. Well, talk to me about, you know, when you're collaborating with other people, I guess in the sense of creatively, but also on actual projects that you're hired for, do those things come to you? Do you search for them? And if you're searching for them, how do you approach that? What's the way you go about doing that?
I mean, I've always, like with creative collaborations, it's pretty much always been like people coming to me, and I haven't really searched for stuff. Honestly, I guess because since my production style feels like sort of left field in the Australian music landscape, I have maybe felt a bit nervous, you know, which I know you're not supposed to say on a podcast, but I think if you feel it, true.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like most people who I've produced for, I'm trying to think if there's any exceptions, but it's really been people who've sought me out because they like have said, I really enjoy the specific flavor that you give to music, and I'd love to do more of that kind of work, honestly. Like it is a real buzz when you collaborate creatively with someone who's like a real kindred spirit in the sounds that they love and the sort of stuff that they love.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to have a go at trying to describe what comes to me when I listen to the music that you create as well as the stuff that you work on. A lot of it is electro and pop and that sort of world, but it is avant-garde in the sense that you're pushing boundaries. Sonically, there's kind of like to me, it sounds like you're looking for something new each time you do it, but it's not avant-garde in the sense of it's like, trying to grab your attention necessarily. It's kind of quite pleasant to listen to, and, you know, but it is highly creative. So, but the other thing that I notice is a lot of it has quite this like eerie, almost like darkness to it. Is that intentional, or is that something that it just kind of happens and you just let it be?
I think it just seeps out of my soul. It's funny that you say that because I get two different kinds of feedback around Aphir stuff. And one of them is what you've just said, that it's like a dark feeling vibe. And then the other one is that it's relaxing. Like some people listen to my stuff and they're like, that's a bit creepy. And some people listen to like the exact same tracks and they're like, makes me feel chill.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it's a Rorschach test. Like maybe it's not me, maybe it's you.
Sweet. No, that's great. I mean, that's the beauty of music is that everyone feels something different when they listen to it, depending on how they're feeling on the day, depending on what they've just listened to, what they've been listening to for a year, all that sort of stuff. That is the beauty of music. And it's great. I love it, and I love ambient music and electronic stuff. So it's really, really nice to listen to. So yeah, you got a fan in me. But I guess let's branch off. We talked about a lot of the stuff that works. I guess in your, whether it be a job that you're working on or your own music, what are the sort of brick walls that come up, and how do you overcome challenges?
I mean, I feel like over the years, probably the biggest challenge that I've had to overcome is ego. And I think people are like it's sometimes unclear what people mean when they say that. So I will endeavor to explain. Basically, like I think, when I first started out mixing and mastering in particular, I felt so what's the word? Kind of like shaken up by like mix notes. Like people, obviously you do a mix, people send notes back and they're like, hey, can you change blah, blah, blah. And I think it's pretty common for people like starting out in engineering stuff to like feel a little bit taken aback by that kind of stuff. And like I've definitely seen like bigger engineers than me like feel like nervous about that or feel weird about that. And like I think in particular like seeing Andrei get notes back for his mixes was useful for me because it meant that I saw someone who was much more experienced than I was in the early days, like receiving critique as well. And I think maybe unless I had seen that, things would have been even more difficult. But I think that, there's a lot of work and experience that goes into working out which parts of what your ear is telling you about a song are like technical prompts and which are to do with your own taste. And I think that like digging into that and kind of really working out what's going on there is pretty important and takes a long time potentially. And, a lot of the emotions that you might feel if you're critiqued on something that maybe is more your taste than your like technical ear, like it can be kind of murky and can be hard to even tell that you're having a feeling about it, and then later on you're kind of feeling bad about yourself, and then you can reflect and just be like, oh, I'm speaking as like you might do this. No, this has been my experience. Is like sure. I often would get really self-critical and then realize that it was because I have like things that I love to hear in music, and I guess just have really needed throughout my career to find a way to like express the best of my technical self in my mixing and mastering work, and like keep an outlet for like the things that are very much my niche personal taste in my own artistic output. And sometimes those things cross over, like it's not a hard and fast, boundary between them. But it does take a bit of sorting through if you're like making your own music and producing and mixing and mastering for other people, I think.
Well, I don't.
Does that make sense? Sorry, that was a bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, you've put it in an interesting way though, because I think everyone would be able to relate to what you've said about, kind of feeling like that mix notes can be like a personal thing, like your mix sounds like shit, but it's not, or this, or the way that you've done this sounds crap, or whatever internal way we interpret a note. Because I guess the whole thing about mixing is it is half technical, half creative, and we have to put, because we love music. I mean, I don't know if you could do this job if you didn't love music. So we're putting our heart into it. We're putting our, experience and like life experience into it, even because it's emotional. We're relating back to how we felt when we heard these things in the past. Like, some song might trigger a specific memory of something. So all of those things that add up and, cause us to make this mix move, for example, when someone disagrees with it, it can feel like a personal attack. So like you said, it takes practice to be able to look at that and go, well, at the end of the day, it's their project. And just because I want something a certain way doesn't mean that everyone else does. So yeah, I mean, I can absolutely relate to that. And at the end of the day, we just have to try and, like you said, have a conversation about, hey, maybe this is how I'm feeling about that part. What do you where do you kind of have that opinion about it? Or, I mean, we might be digging too deep into that, but sometimes it does require those sorts of conversations to be like, I really want to understand why you want this to sound that way.
Well, I mean, this kind of circles right back to what we were saying before about like having that conversation open and that leading to understanding an artist's vision all the better. And I think that, like in terms of mix notes, it's one way, it's one expression of an artist's vision. And it's like, if as a mix engineer or a mastering engineer, you have the humility to like really listen to what an artist is saying, that's always going to bring you something good as well in your craft, because like you develop your ability to understand and interpret what a wider range of artists are wanting and what they're seeing and it taps into like broad trends as well. Like it's not just when you learn about one artist, you can be learning about more than one artist, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, those things sometimes lead to the coolest parts as well, because, I can relate it to when I'm producing. I work with a lot of bands and they've had these songs for quite a while. And when you try and give, a production tip or like, hey, maybe we change this chord or something like that, or even when they have that sort of thing where like they have an idea, oh, what if we try this? And I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. And then they try it and I'm like, that is awesome. Thank you for bringing that up. You know what I mean? They can lead to those cool things.
Totally. Absolutely.
Nice. Well, when I want to understand kind of when you're listening to a mix or, referencing a mix or something like that, what is your idea of something that sounds good or is a good mix or is a good production? Like, I want to understand what your thoughts are around that.
Whew. I mean, it's just there's so many ways that things can be good. I think this is why like having that humility to different tastes is so good to cultivate, because like there are so many ways to have good taste. I love a mix that creates the best version of the world that the production of a song is going for. So if that's like if that's a hyperpop production where the highs have to be searing and the lows have to, like, you know, shake the earth.
Yeah.
Then like hearing that expression is really satisfying. If it's something that's a bit more kind of like musty and mysterious, then like hearing like with a lot of Aphir stuff, I guess I'm going for like a production sound that's kind of like a futuristic sound that has been like uncovered after an apocalypse or something. And so like it's like the technology you're listening to this futuristic thing on is damaged, and so it kind of sounds like a bit gacked or whatever.
Awesome.
And so like hearing, you know, the artifacts and the mustiness, if that's what people are going for. I just love, like, I think that something that really just satisfies me about the whole process of mixing and producing is like creating spaces. Like you're always creating some kind of a space. That's what reverb is about. That's what like hearing different frequencies placed in, like, given different emphasis. Like that's what hearing music that way is about. And if the space can be like a really engaging space or just the best version of that space, that's what I love.
I love that. That's such a great way to put it. It's awesome. Well, I guess from there, tell me about, you know, some of your favorite tools to use, I guess. You know, both, do you use hardware as well as software stuff, or are you primarily going for software type things?
I'm mostly an in-the-box girly, but I use, like, when I can get my hands on good preamps, I will use them. I really like the Gordon, which is like an Australian-made, like super nice, clean pre.
Cool.
And, you know, I can get around a Neve for some filth as well.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like, I use a lot of FabFilter stuff for mixing and mastering because I love to have control, as I mentioned before, in terms of EQ and compression specifically. I use the Soundtoys suite like creatively as well as occasionally technically to, like, I think sometimes like adding color to a sound is a technical choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's kind of like you're not really hitting the mark of the genre unless you're adding that saturation or whatever it might be. So yeah, I use a lot of free plugins. So like I'm just a fiend for things I don't have to pay for. I really, at the moment, I'm loving, there's like a free plugin that's like an MP3 emulator.
Yep.
And it's called Codec. And it looks very aesthetic because it's like because it's free. Occasionally, it can be a little bit glitchy if you like have it bypassed. It can do some funny things to the timing of your track occasionally, but it does sound cool. And you can pay for a lot of plugins that do exactly the same thing. So it's like, you know. On the free plugins front, I also use Crush with a K, which is one from Tritic, like a bit crushing, downsampling kind of little unit. I love, there's this plugin as well called Cassette for like tapey sounds. That's not free, unfortunately, but it is really dope. I really enjoy it. And like a lot of friends also use that plugin Sketch Cassette, which is like I think a similar vibe, like adding like tapey effects and stuff. But I haven't got that one, but I have enjoyed it when I've used it in other contexts. So.
In that vein, try Cymatics Origin. That plugin is awesome. It'll downgrade your sound and it's free as well. So it's
great, love it.
It's an awesome plugin. Yep.
Just all about that. I think it's like you get to this moment of being a mix engineer when you've like been working so hard to make everything sound pristine for a really long time, and then you just need to cut loose and you just download all these plugins that make everything sound like shit. It's like, but it's aesthetically shit. Anyway.
No, I love it. And when you're recording vocals, do you have a go-to vocal chain, I guess?
Well, I am right now talking into this U47 FET, which I have instead of a superannuation, and it's great. It's a very versatile mic. There's not many people whose voices it makes sound bad. And if I can get my hands on this equipment, I would, for very versatile, clean vocals, I would run this into the Gordon preamp and like a Tube Tech compressor. Because like those things so I do a lot of work out of Carriage Studio in Naarm, and those things are in Carriage Studio. So those are go-tos.
Yeah, love it.
Or like, running it into a Neve if I want something that is a bit more sort of like vintagey sounding. I use a lot of I shouldn't say a lot. I use subtle but effective like FabFilter Pro Q3 for just like a surgical here's what I'm doing to that vocal to make sure it's not cooked. And use Pro MB to just multi-band any like big old vowel sounds, a compressor to make sure that it's compressed if the Tube Tech hasn't, or any like outboard compression that I might have had access to isn't already doing enough. I used to parallel compress vocals a whole lot, and I still do that for like poppier sound, but it really depends. I sort of stopped always telling people to do it because I found that people would occasionally do it in since I'm in this like experimental ambient world, like people would occasionally start parallel compressing vocals that need to sound quite like back in the mix, and it's like there's not really like much of a point doing that. So de-essing, we love that. I, for whatever reason, I have the most like me personally, I've recorded a lot of vocalists, but I am the vocalist who I have heard make the most lip noises, like not because of, recording me more than anyone else. It's just like, I don't know what is wrong with my mouth. There's like a lot going on there. And maybe I need some sort of like niche vocal training.
You need
or something.
That dentist thing to...
But yes, I definitely, if there's like some things happening, I'll like go into Isotope RX and take out the little like snorts,
clicks and pops.
Like, why do I snort like that? Other vocalists that I have like edited stuff for and recorded, I don't have to edit out snorts, but for me, for some reason, anyway.
That's awesome. Well, let's touch on the Wettest 100. Tell us a bit about how that came to be and also what it looks like now.
Well, okay. Thank you for asking this question, because this is really what I've been like throwing all my time into for a little minute. So I started the Wettest 100 as a total experiment in 2021. Yeah, 2021. Because I'd just been having this running, not even a joke really. It was kind of a like, haha, wouldn't it be funny if there was a harsh noise hottest 100? No one would do that, right? Unless and obviously no one did it, because what I've realized now is that it's a shit ton of work to run something like that. But it is very rewarding. But yeah, like basically I started it as this like experiment on my Instagram where people would vote for left field tracks like, punk, DIY, ambient, experimental, alt pop kind of stuff in a Q&A box in my story. And I literally put this Q&A box up every day for a month and screenshot the votes that people voted for. And heaps of people voted. Like it was just like, oh, people actually want this. Okay, so we made it its own Instagram account. And then last year, one of my friends was like, hey, like I'll make you, or like I guess end of the year before, a friend was like, I'll make you a website because it'd be cool. Like this initiative's cool. Like let's have a website for it. So Raphael made this sick website and we did voting partially off the website and partially on Instagram because we were kind of like, maybe no one will vote on the website. Like it's cool to have a website to legitimize it, but like people might just not want to stray from Instagram.
Yeah.
But it turned out most people voted on the website. And so we moved all the voting there this year.
Awesome.
And last year it doubled in size. And this year it like more than doubled in size in terms of like number of voters and number of tracks voted for. Which is, I think, like, you know, a lot due to just community support, but like APRA also got behind it this year, which was really cool.
So sick.
There's a few like sponsors on board who are going to kind of add like material value essentially for some of the artists who are ranking. So like Ableton's sponsoring the top ranking electronic artist, and Carriage Studio will give like the highest ranking NAM-based artists some free studio time, and there's like 4,000 studios jumping on board to offer the highest ranking Queensland artists some free time in their studios. So it's like there's a lot of stuff just coming together around it, I guess. And it still is like in the, I would say it's still in the experimental phase. Like there's definitely kinks to iron out, but it's really cool to see how much people want to have something like this. And I hope that it can keep growing. I hope that it can become something that like allows a lot of artists who deserve to be more heard.
Absolutely. It's such a great initiative, and props to you for kicking it off and staying with it. It's one of those things where you can start something and it can do stuff, but then keeping it going is obviously always the hard part. So I obviously wish you the best of luck and hope that it keeps going. And when's it happening this year? What's the date for the stream or the is it a live stream? And tell me a bit about that actually, because I don't fully know.
So because it's still growing, basically like there's like each year there's been kind of like a clear ranking of a certain number of tracks. Like first year it was like there were 10 tracks that you could just say those are the top 10. And then there's like a bunch of ties. And so what we did was we like did a live stream, 10 tracks countdown, and then celebrated 100 tracks on the Instagram just through the day and not ranking them. Like there is kind of like a broad ranking, I guess, in there because it's like there's like a tie of a certain number of votes and then there's a tie, like there's kind of like 2 or 3 brackets this year. But what we'll do this year, I think there's like 23 tracks that are very clearly like these are the countdown tracks. And we also do like a top albums round because I think in the more left fields world, there's definitely like a sense that it's less about singles. Like albums are actually quite important to people's listening experience. And so this year it'll be 8 albums that are quite clearly ranked. And that's from like 140 odd albums that people have voted for. And it'll get streamed on February 11th, which is coming out very soon.
Next week.
Yeah, literally this Sunday.
At the time of recording.
Yeah.
Well, this episode won't be out by then. So is there a way for anyone to be able to like listen back, or where can they find all the info of what has charted?
So Instagram's kind of our main hub still. So the handle's just at Wettest100. And there's also a website, so it's wettest100.au. And you can read more about it all. I did an interview with APRA, so if you just like Google Wettest100 APRA, I'm sure it'll pop up. If you want to learn more about the law.
Playlists, is there?
Yeah, so I'm a bit on the fence this year of how to do that because Spotify has been really whack, honestly, this year, in that they have like taken away royalties for like a lot of emerging artists. Like every track that in a year doesn't stream over 1,000 plays, like just doesn't get royalties for that year, which is very bad actually. So I want to sort of have the playlisting more Bandcamp based, or like have a way to point people more to Bandcamp. But at the time of recording, that is a problem for future me. Because
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, any listener, be sure to follow and keep track of all that stuff because it's such a great initiative. Yeah, awesome stuff.
Thanks so much for your support of it too. I appreciate that.
No worries. Let's finish up by, I always do this with my guests. I would love to hear your best bits of advice for, first of all, people that are producing and engineering in their first 5 years and then artists who are in their first 5 years.
I feel like the advice is kind of the same for both.
Cool.
I think it's literally just like find like-minded people, find your people in the music world, like spend time working out what your taste is, what you're excited about, and just go to shows and support the people around you who you're really vibing. And I think that just the faster you can find community that you respect, the easier it becomes to respect yourself. And I think when you respect yourself, it's easier to like have the humility that you need to improve at your craft, if that makes sense. 'Cause it is, just something that you need to be able to spend a lot of time with and go really deep with. And if you can be kind to yourself and not like kind of self-punishing in your attitude while you're doing that, then it's really ideal.
Fantastic. I love it. It's really great advice, and, you know, finding your tribe is so crucial for all those reasons you mentioned, for support, for, you know, trying stuff out, for just having a sounding board whenever you have a random idea or something like that. All of those reasons are really, really cool. And, you know, just being in the music industry is tough. It's hard. It's like, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of unpaid hours, and having people around you to just weather that storm with is, it's just one of those things that you need, really. And so for anyone that doesn't have that, for whatever reason, if you're listening to this, and you're always welcome to reach out to me. And I can imagine, Becki, that you're probably feeling the same way. If if people are resonating with what you're saying, I'm sure they can reach out to you. So where can they find you online?
Well, I probably spend too much time on Instagram myself. So that's a good place. I'm like Aphir with an underscore on Instagram. And people are always welcome to email me. I am BeckiWhitton@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been awesome. I've loved it. And you've had some really, really cool insights, and just your approach to music, and, keeping it weird and, left field is awesome. So I love that. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
You're very welcome. And for anyone that has made it this far, thank you so much. Appreciate your support. If you could do us a favor, if you really want to follow along with what we do here, make sure to follow or subscribe on any platform that you're checking this out on. If you have any questions or you have any suggestions, you can email me. The email link is in the show notes. I will have links to everything that, everything that's related to Becki will be in the show notes as well. Thank you once again. And we will see you next time on What's That Sound? Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.